And now I absolutely love the young voices and all the amazing commentators and contributors they bring to the table. And this morning, I'm bringing over Gabriella Hoffman. She is returning to the show. She is an avid fisherwoman, which I absolutely love about her. But we're also just going to be talking about the top 8 races that are hitting this nation today and what do we see on the horizon in the coming weeks. And I'm sincerely saying the coming weeks because we are being told by the national media that it may be weeks until we know some of these races. So I would love to invite my dear friends and audience to join us in welcoming Gabriella Hoffman. Good morning, ma'am. How are you this morning? Oh, hold on a second. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Good to join you again.
It's okay. It's okay. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm a little hot, a little sweaty. We've been out talking to different people, capturing some images of the gas prices, talking about the kitchen table, talking about our intercoastal waterways, which I know you're very familiar with, and wanting to keep them clean and not the swamps of Washington, D.C. And, I wanted just to kind of get your analysis in. We are here on election day, and Daily Signal put out this morning about the top 8 races to be watching. But my first question to you is this: do you think we're actually going to know the winners tomorrow morning for Pennsylvania, for Arizona? What are your thoughts? Because I'm hearing a lot of different statements. We're not going to know for days, maybe even weeks.
I would hope those statements are incorrect. I think some people may be saying that just to depress the vote. Mm-hmm. Perhaps they're nervous about record turnout, so they want to say, okay, there may be too many people coming to vote. Might as well process these later. But I really don't want to focus in on that. I think we will know most of the results, hopefully, if not all the results, mm-hmm. but majority of the results. We'll have an idea where control falls in both the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. I think if it's a record turnout that has been undercounted by pollsters and commentators, I think we could very well know pretty easily. We've seen Fetterman want to perhaps stall the election counting further. He has filed lawsuits, and I think the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has said that that challenge will not be honored, if I read the report correctly.
Yes.
So I think, like I said, it depends on turnout. People don't know how many voters are going to be turning out, if it's going to be higher than usual, higher than predicted. I think we just have to wait and see with respect to that. But in this country, it should be easy to know the victors within a timely fashion. I think you see that across both Democrats and Republicans, and the people who are not instilling confidence in voting are doing a disservice to America's voters. So we should know. And I would hope that we do know the majority of the results. And I think we will.
Yes. Well, let me mention this to you. And this is not a national news story. This is friends calling me from a different state, a state that I love very much. And they said, my husband took over his ballot. It was already signed, sealed, delivered, ready to put in the ballot box because he knew he wasn't going to have very much time to go in and literally vote this morning. And the poll watcher took it and ripped it in front of him. And I don't know what to say to that. And I said, okay, let me break this down. Let me make sure I got your story right, because I don't want you to depict it in the wrong way. But that is it in a nutshell. Let me ask you something. One, when a poll watcher takes your ballot that's been signed and sealed and ready to be delivered and rips it in half, that's illegal. That's illegal, correct? That's an offense, correct?
I'm not a lawyer, but to my understanding, I think that would be an offense. You can't do that, especially if the person has followed all the laws. So they should report it to the election commission in their county if they haven't already. That's my understanding. I know some of those instances do occur, and they need to immediately report that if that's the case, because sometimes that does happen, unfortunately. I don't think that's going to largely define most voters. But certainly, I hope they recorded that act of them doing that and do report that immediately. But I think enthusiasm is high, and I think we are even seeing Republicans returning actually in big numbers, early voting. I voted early in person because I'm not sure what it is, what I'm doing this week. I'm self-employed, so I need to vote early because I could have some meetings. Today it's kind of busy, so I wanted to vote ahead of time just to not get lost. Plus, there was only the congressional seat
Right.
race contest open in my neck of Virginia. So I
Yeah.
didn't have much to vote for, but I was happy to cast my vote against Don Beyer, who's
Yes.
potentially compromised with one of his recently fired staffers. But that's besides the point.
Sure.
But Republicans, even if they don't like early absentee voting or early in-person voting, they are showing up to do
Yes.
these early voting means.
Yes.
And we have to look, let's say Miami-Dade, Palm Beach County, Orange County, Florida. I've looked to see that recently. And we see that Republican turnout exceeds Democrat turnout in Miami-Dade County for early voting. That's very impressive. So if we can nail that game, which I think Republicans will do, because some states you can't overcome that unless it, the state legislature changes, it back to a not relying on a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot only type or leaning type of vote. But I think Republicans are going to use and exhaust any means, early in person, vote day of, mail-in ballot, because they know what's at stake if there's not a check on this administration. And I think you see increasingly a lot of people want divided government. Right. We saw even Elon Musk chime in, the new Twitter owner. He said, as an independent himself, and he's kind of caught some hot water. He's in hot water for these comments. I don't know if they broach inappropriate or if he's supposedly meddling in elections. I don't think so, because you see Democrat owners and employees of Twitter in the past always saying, please vote Democrat. So, I think that they're whatabouting and they're not being consistent, and they don't like it that someone as prominent as Elon Musk, the world's richest man, telling people to vote for Republicans for House and Senate and governor's races because he wants divided government. I think most people want divided government. Even people on the center left want divided government. And I think I went on Fox 5 DC last night and I was talking about how it's not just Republicans who are voting for Republican candidates. I look here in Virginia with what our elections were last year. We had people, independents, and a sizable number of Democrats cross party lines to vote for my now governor, Glenn Youngkin. And we're going to see that same kind of crossover with people who are not traditionally Republican voters because they're personally affected by all these inflation policies, higher gas prices, concerned about education.
Yes.
So I think a lot of commentators, even though I'm a conservative and I would like the Republicans to win, I could even see beyond my partisan lens that there are people who don't agree with us who are wanting to give Republicans a chance. And a lot of people are missing that. And Republicans are going to have to learn how to navigate, appealing to those voters. It doesn't mean compromising your conservative values, but people are looking for limited government, low tax, individual type policies where people are not going to be burdened and they're not going to have, their rights infringed upon, their livelihoods at stake. So I think even a semblance of conservative values is starting to be felt by people who would not traditionally vote for Republicans. And so if we expect, let's say, the best case scenario for Republicans in both the House and the Senate, will President Biden moderate? I don't think so. I think he is very much embedded in his leftward lurch. He's being instructed to do that. If he does turn around and moderate, I would be shocked. But that's just the nature of politics today. Everything is super partisan. So you don't expect party leaders to moderate their tone, especially on the left. So that's kind of my assessment of it. But we can break down the races, the top 8 races.
Oh, let's break them down. I've been dying to do this with you all day. Okay, let's do my favorite. Let's do Fetterman Oz first. Let's break that one down first.
Yes, the Real Clear Politics average has started to show Oz leading. And there was, I think, 538 came out with their betting odds. And they found that Oz has a 57 out of 100 chance of winning. We had not seen that before. And if that's their final metric, that may be a very good sign for Dr. Oz. And I think Pennsylvania could be decided on a narrow margin. I think that's what it is. And it'll likely favor Oz if we do see Pennsylvanians and even suburban Philadelphia residents and Pittsburgh residents pull the lever for Oz because they don't have confidence in Fetterman to perform, given his health issues and also his extreme positions.
Yes.
For even Pennsylvania, it does have a history of electing Democrats, largely more centrist Democrats, but he's even too far to the left for many Pennsylvanians. I've traveled to Pennsylvania on numerous occasions. I have fished in Pennsylvania. I kind of know the area a little bit, talking to friends. I can't say I'm an expert, of course, but it's very similar to to Virginia, rather, in many ways. You have a lot of rural outposts.
Yes,
it's certainly more urbanized than Virginia, but I think people will see that Fetterman's crime policies, which would allow hardened criminals who shouldn't be out on the streets to be released, I think that's top of mind for voters. They see that he would be a rubber stamp for the Green New Deal, for
Yep.
high tax, big spending bills, a rubber stamp for President Biden. And like I said, I think the debate that they had between each other highlighted a lot of flaws and a lot of shortcomings for Fetterman. And it's unfortunate he suffered a stroke, and we wish him well and we hope he recovers. But being a senator is a very important task. And if you can't meet the demands of the job, it's a very taxing position.
Yes,
You have
it
to
is.
debate, you're expected to go on TV, you have to host meet and greets, you have to host town halls, you have to be able to engage in robust debate. And Democrats were fine when former Illinois Senator Mark Kirk suffered a stroke, and they said, okay, it's time for him to go, and we have to have Tammy Duckworth come in. And I'm not trying to what about here, but
Sure.
in his case, he seems to be really struggling, and he was trying to reassure voters, well, I'm going to be healthy by January. People don't want to know where you're going to be by January. Are you up to the task today?
Now, right,
Now.
exactly.
So I think Oz will carry it over, perhaps by a slimmer margin than most of us would like him to, but I expect that he would if he sold his message well to Pennsylvanians and they see Fetterman for who he is.
Okay, second favorite state, Florida. So I had my campaign manager, previous campaign manager here last night. We were talking about Kristen and DeSantis. And I love America's governor. I respect America's governor. He's an amazing, amazing public servant, and his wife as well. So her comment was this, and since Chris was already governor years ago, what do we say if it is a slim margin? When DeSantis wins, but a slim margin versus a huge gap. And the bigger concern is, would he win by a slim margin? That would be the bigger concern because of all the things that he's done in the great state of Florida. So the question is there election integrity issues going to be surfacing with the fact that if he, wins by such a slim margin, where in reality he really should win by a large margin?
I think he's projected to win by a large margin. Like I had referenced in our earlier conversation, or just earlier on this segment, rather. Miami-Dade early voting shows Republicans with a 6,000 vote plus advantage. And we have never seen that before. So I expect in-person voting to be probably a wider margin. This is the first time a lot of forecasters say that Miami-Dade County is going to pull the lever for Republicans for the governor's race and also for the Senate contest. So I don't see Governor DeSantis winning by a slim margin like he did when he was first elected governor. I think he's in a comfortable lead because there is a now, I think, net 300,000 vote advantaging Republicans statewide. It was previously a negative 500,000 vote difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats used to have the lead prior to him being governor. So he has done a lot as a campaigner and as a governor to win over people and have them register for his party, for the Republican Party of Florida. And so I'm not worried about his prospects. I think he will handily beat Charlie Crist because he's the same old, same old. He was governor. He switched his political stripes, and that doesn't instill confidence in Floridians. And I think a lot of people, even some Democrats in Florida, like what he's doing for Everglades restoration, for Hurricane Ian relief efforts. And they like that he kept Florida largely open for much of the pandemic. So I think he's going to win comfortable. So I don't think we have to worry so much about a slim margin because that 2018 was a difficult year for Republicans. This is a whole different scenario. Like I said, the election numbers favor him. More people are registered Republican now in Florida. And if Miami-Dade, even early indicators show that Republicans are leading even by a slim margin, in that really traditionally deep blue county, I think he's well positioned. Same with Marco Rubio.
Okay, perfect. I love that one. Let's talk about Kari Lake. Let's talk about Arizona. What does that look like? Do you think it's going to be pretty slim with that one?
I have seen some interesting numbers. So initially, I wasn't sure she was going to be competitive because she was kind of campaigning on old issues. And some people had thought she was extreme. But the more I started to watch her and see her command of the media and the issues she was starting to campaign, she kind of won me over stylistically, rhetorically. And the fact that her challenger refused to debate her was a very interesting indictment. And I think Arizonans who were kind of reprimanding the former president for insulting John McCain, and that unfortunately did play a factor in why Arizona went blue. Arizona is contrarian. It does lean Republican. It's a historically conservative state. Barry Goldwater, of course, with that history. And I think people saw what happened when Arizona went blue. Not so much statewide because they have a great Republican governor in Doug Ducey. but they were very upset by the results in 2020. And Carrie Lake was able to tap into something very unique. You don't have to agree with all her positions. I don't necessarily agree with some of her positions, but she has proven on the important issues like protecting school choice. Arizona just enshrined into law one of the best school choice items, scholarships, the ESA scholarship. And she wants to continue that. So she may win over people who were not previously in support of her. And with her opponent, the Secretary of State, floundering and refusing to debate her, the polls have started to actually go in Carrie Lake's direction as governor. I think she could win by maybe 2, 3, 4 percentage points because her opponent has just said abortion, 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 democracy, democracy, democracy. And she hasn't really put up a contrast. And she's been pretty cringe. So I think even Arizona's voters, who tend to be contrarian at times, even though it is a historically Republican state in most instances, I think it could go in her favor. I think her being a well-known media figure, she was in one of the biggest media markets in Phoenix. So people do remember her, even if they don't agree with her. And they see that perhaps she is better tasked with leading Arizona going forward. So I think that'll be a state to watch. And I think hopefully she will be able to govern and transition into that pretty well and have good advisors who will keep her focused and keep on building up from what Arizona has accomplished, because Arizona has been a leading state under Doug Ducey's leadership. I think a lot of people were mad at him over 2020, and tried to, denounce him, but he's a very stalwart conservative guy when you look at his accomplishments. So she has to continue what he has put into place there. And I think the voters see that. I think actually her prospects are slightly more improved than Blake Masters, because that's a little more toss up. And we can talk about that race too, but I think he's closing the gap but I think the governor's race, she will probably, if she wins, and even if he wins by a narrow margin, I think he will ride off her coattails. I think she is the one who could help carry him across the line if people have doubts.
Well, also, let's talk about one election I'm really following very closely has been Michigan. And we had Shane Hernandez, who's the running mate for Teeter Dixon, on last week. So what are your thoughts on Dixon Hernandez and the whole Whitmer campaigning? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it looks close, but have you seen differently? Yes.
I've seen some polling kind of all over the map. So some showing it a toss-up, some showing it with a Whitmer narrow lead. But I think Michigan could be very much like Virginia. Governor Whitmer actually was a pretty bad COVID responder.
Yes,
she had kept her state under lockdowns. I remember from an outdoor perspective, she had shut off access to boating, but only her husband can go boating in the marina when it was really
I remember
kind of that dangerous time. And
I remember that. Yeah.
She comes off as an elitist. She had a very poor track record in responding to COVID, oversaw the nursing home calamity in Michigan. And you look recently in the most recent weeks, education has become a top of mind issue. You see the Muslim community of Dearborn, Michigan coming out against reimagining education and putting all these inappropriate books out there for students. And that isn't a traditionally Republican voting bloc. They are conservative on social issues, but they tend to vote for Democrats. But they were ostracizing Rashida Tlaib and Debbie Dingell for putting that material or supporting that material, especially at the local level, not responding to it. So I think she has tapped into something interesting. Can she close the gap? I think most people can assume she would. It depends how well her ground game was in Michigan. But I think Michigan, like any state that has a potential to flip, can do so. I think, like I said, in Virginia, we had a very, very, not a super draconian COVID response from our former Democratic governor, but it was pretty bad. And I think Michigan's was a lot worse. So if the people were very disoriented and dismayed by what she did under COVID with the closures, keeping schools closed for an extended period of time, kind of her lurch to the far left, and just being a rubber stamp for President Biden, I think she could possibly lose her job if Tudor Dixon was able to make the case, her and her running mate. But I think Michigan, of any of the Great Lakes states, I think could have the best likelihood of flipping. Possibly Wisconsin too. I've seen some numbers go in that candidate's favor against Tony Evers. And maybe Minnesota. I don't know. Minnesota is always kind of a sticky point for me because it has a potential to flip. And I know people in Minnesota. I have a good friend of mine, a former employee of mine, is a state senator. She's a great person. I think she could have a future in Minnesota politics. And you see what's happening there. They were affected by, obviously, the riots of 2020, COVID closures, economic malaise. So maybe the Great Lakes could surprise us today, but I think Michigan will surprise us the most if it goes in Republicans' favor.
Yeah, that would be, oh, I know it'd be an absolute blessing. Let's talk about Tiffany Smiley. I absolutely adore her background. I really respect her background, and I just love how she is rising. What are your thoughts on that one?
She's a very fascinating character, and her personal story of
Yes.
helping her husband who
Yes.
is totally blind and raising her 3 kids. It's an inspiration, regardless
Yes,
of where you
it is.
fall in the political aisle. And her
Yes.
dedication to her husband and family is very admirable. And her professional accomplishments are pretty impressive too. It's really interesting that the Washington Senate race started to become, among conservatives, very competitive, and it's made a lot of Democrats very nervous. Patty Murray, to me, is a rubber stamp for President Biden. And as it concerns freelancers, she was the Senate champion of the Protecting the Right to Work, or Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, which would displace upwards of 59 million freelancers. I would personally like to see her taken out if we can't help it, because she is supporting legislation that will hurt small business owners, one-person businesses, franchise businesses. And I hope, and I'm going to write something at Town Hall about how Republicans have to protect freelancers, because that's 36% of the workforce. But I think I would personally like to see her deposed because of what she is doing there. And that issue should take off more. But I think Washingtonians have had enough of her governance. Yes. She's been there for 3 decades now.
Yes.
And
yes,
she hasn't improved the quality of life. She's only just, advanced far left positions. Yes. And people in Washington state are hurting. I have an aunt and uncle that live in Vancouver, Washington, right across the Portland border. And they would like to see a change. I don't know if Tiffany Smiley will be able to flip the seat. If she does, that is going to be incredible. She's a great candidate, and if she loses, maybe it's just not the right state to run in. But if she comes even close, that's very fascinating there. But she would be, I think that type of a candidate would be good for those bluish states. Yes. Going forward. She can, if she loses narrowly this time, maybe she'll run again next time and win, even with a slim majority. Or if she stuns political observers and forecasters and somehow manages to win, that would be incredible, like I said. But yeah, I don't know. Washington may be hard to overcome because it is so advantaged for Democrat voters. But if independent voters, which I think make up a sizable number of the voting bloc there, do come swinging for her, and every Republican votes for her too, and even some Democrats, she has said she has tried to capture some Democratic voters. Perhaps she could pose a serious challenge to Patty Murray. So we'll see. That race is going to come out later than for most of us. Then they're on the West Coast, we're on the East Coast, so we may not know initial reading into it if they're going to make early calls for that, because, like I said, it is advantage to Democratic voters more, given just the political inclination and leanings of that state. But yeah, that could be an interesting state to watch. I don't know. I can't forecast if she'll win, but at least she'll give Patty Murray a run for her money.
Well, you know what? She really already has. She's just been a phenomenal human to watch. I receive her press releases daily, and I just love hearing her story and just the drive, the zeal, and what she brings to the platform. And even if for some reason she doesn't, she has an amazing future ahead of her. And the eyes are all on her in many, many ways. So I just really respect and admire her. We have a little less than a minute left. Final thoughts altogether, final statements on today's election day.
I think Republicans are projected to win in big numbers. I don't know if it's a tsunami level type victory, but I started to see even lefty forecasters like Larry Sabato's crystal ball say that Republicans will hold the House, I think, close to 230 seats, and at minimum 51 seats of 100 at the worst case scenario. It could be better. We have to see how New Hampshire, even Colorado, how they perform, because those are also in play too, especially New Hampshire is really in play. I was really excited to see that, because it's the live free or die state. It's a libertarian state. They shouldn't have to, settle with Maggie Hassan. But I think at minimum, Republicans will have a good night. If I'm wrong, we can come on again and talk about it. But I think the trends point to it. Like I said, it's not just Republicans who are voting for center-right candidates. You even have independents, big time, going to the bat for Republicans, and a sizable number of Democrats. So if all those 3 voting blocks do turn out for Republicans, Democrats are going to have a very bad night.
Mhm. On that note, I love it how you just ended it. On that note, here at Common Sense America, we love having Young Voices contributor, media strategist, town hall contributor, writer, Gabriella Hoffman. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Gabby_Hoffman. I just love having you here and your political analysis. Thank you for breaking it down. And you know what? If you are available tomorrow for like 5 minutes to break down the post-election night, I'll reach out to Anders. I'd love
Sure.
to have you back. But thank you so much, Gabby. Have a fabulous election day, and I'll hopefully see you tomorrow. Have a great
Yes,
day.
same to you. Rest
Thanks,
easy.
Gabby. All right, take
Okay.
care. Bye-bye. And for all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America.